In this video, I have rounded up all of the snowy horror and thriller books that I have read, and I am going to let you guys know if these books actually come through with those chilly, isolated vibes and if they are worth your time. The first book I have to talk about is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I feel like this is a pretty polarizing read. I feel like people either really love it or they really hate it. This is pretty much a domestic thriller where we are following a husband and wife going on a vacation, trying to salvage their marriage. And while on their vacation, they start experiencing very weird things happening at this Airbnb that they're staying at. I did think that there was very creepy moments in this book, but it definitely was not as action-packed as I was hoping. This is definitely a domestic thriller, so there is a lot of focus on this husband and wife and their relationship. There is a lot of flashbacks of how their relationship got to where it is. A lot of character backstory, which is just not something that I typically enjoy reading, especially when I do not like the characters. If I love the characters, then give me all the backstory and I'll have fun with it. But I did not like either of these characters, neither the husband or wife. Having to spend so much time reading about their relationship, it just was really boring to me. I do feel like this book is very unbelievable, but it is a premise that I have not read about before. Sort of the gimmick of this book is the fact that the husband of this couple has this sort of condition where he does not recognize faces. God, I feel like as soon as I heard that synopsis that the husband does not recognize faces, it just seems so obvious, like where the book is gonna go. I feel like for that reason, the payoff and twist was not very satisfying to me. Honestly, it was just kind of gimmicky. This may be a real condition, but it just felt so convenient to have one of your characters having this condition. The way that the characters go off together, the way that everything just kind of comes together and works out for them, I just could not see that happening. I don't know, something about Alice Feeney's thrillers I just find really over the top. So is this wintry thriller good? In my opinion, I would say no. A lot of people really love this book, so I don't know. In my opinion, no, it's not good. The next book I have to talk about is The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. I only ended up rating The Hunting Party 2 stars. The Hunting Party was such a weird release, in my opinion, for Lucy Foley to come out with, because it was an exact copy of her very successful thriller, The Guest List, only in a different setting. It was that same sort of thriller that we have so many of on the market, that is basically a bunch of friends who are all terrible people, and they come back together and there's like murder and a bunch of past drama and past secrets that get brought back up to light. I do feel like this book was very readable. It was very easy to follow. It's definitely like a popcorn thriller, but I definitely wanted more atmosphere from this book. I wish that we had more descriptions of the snow and the isolation of the characters, because they are pretty much trapped at this lodge while they get snowed in. I really love reading thrillers or horrors when the setting has a very large influence on the plot. And I thought I was gonna get that from this book, but really the whole book, the whole plot just becomes about these characters being very petty, their drama with one another. Ultimately, this was a very basic, formulaic thriller. Similar to Rock, Paper, Scissors, there are a lot of flashback portions of this book where there is a strong focus on these characters' past, and it just becomes so boring because, again, these characters are very annoying, very toxic, very gross. Why do I want to learn all about their life's history? This is not a good recommendation. I did not enjoy The Hunting Party at all. It's just such a predictable, formulaic thriller. This book is infidelity and rich people problems, which is what several of these thriller authors base every single thriller they come out with on. Infidelity and rich people problems. I feel like Lucy Foley, Alice Feeney, and Sarah Pinborough, those three thriller authors, that's like their bread and butter. If you want a book that is going to give you very good, snowy, isolated vibes, and you're looking for a thriller to read like during the winter time, I do not think that The Hunting Party is a very good pick. However, the next book I have to talk about, Breathless by Amy McCulloch. This book definitely comes through a lot better with the atmosphere. If your goal is to feel like the chill and the isolation of the characters, this book is a pretty good pick. Like I said, I absolutely love thriller books and horror books where the setting actually affects the plot, and this one 100% gives that to you. It's definitely a survival story, which I really enjoy reading about, especially winter-themed survival stories. In this book, we are following our main character who is going to climb this mountain with this very famous rock climber, and she's a journalist, and she's basically trying to get him to give her his story. The survival aspect of the story, the challenge of the elements, and the danger of climbing this mountain was my favorite part of this book, and it kept me engrossed. I've definitely seen a lot of very negative reviews on this book, and I understand where people are coming from because I do feel like certain aspects of this book, again, was very predictable. I feel like the villain of this book was very obvious. Okay, so they're climbing this mountain, and then there are murders that start happening within their camp, and I think it becomes really obvious who is committing these murders. But in my opinion, that murder mystery aspect was the least interesting part of this book to me. I read this book originally because I wanted those cold, chilling winter vibes and that survival aspect, and I feel like this book gave that to me, which is what I was expecting going into it. As a whole, I did really enjoy this book. The next book on my list is Krampus by Brom, and this is one that I very much enjoyed and would recommend to you guys. I was immediately hooked going into this book because the prologue chapter really starts this book off with a bang. I love an evil, innocent, flipped storyline similar to Wicked or Maleficent, and I definitely feel like Brom was going for that sort of story with this book. I will say one thing, that I do wish Brom would have played that concept up a little bit more and maybe had a little bit of a different ending to drive that theme home, because the way that this book ends, it really leaves me wondering, what is the moral of the story? For instance, I really love the way that Brom's book Slewfoot ends, and I was expecting Krampus to have something in the same vein as Slewfoot, and it really didn't. It's a different take on that sort of concept. I would have liked a little bit of a different ending, is all I'm saying, but overall I would recommend it to you guys. I liked this book. The next one on my list is 5 Total Strangers by Natalie D. Richards. I thought that this was a really fun, super quick read. I think I read this book in a single sitting. This book is definitely those isolated, snowy vibes. The setting 100% affects the plot in this book, which is what I love. This was a pretty wild ride. It was a tense read. Throughout this book, we are following these set of characters who are trying to get home for the holidays, but because of a snowstorm, they all end up having to like rent a car together and try to drive home, and things just kept going from bad to worse for these characters. While this one was predictable, I do feel like it was a fun, quick read. It gave me what I was looking for, which was the isolated, chilly thriller set in a snow or winter storm blizzard. So for what I was expecting, I got it from this. The next one on my list is An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena. This is another one that I did overall enjoy. It's another one with the isolated setting. It's very obvious that this book was very much inspired by Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. There are also several Agatha Christie mentions throughout the book. I really like the way this book is told. It's told in very short, snappy chapters. For some reason, reading this book felt almost like watching a movie. I found myself very easily being immersed in the story. It's super fast-paced. You almost honestly get whiplash from the rapid switch of character narration, but I did feel like it was well written and it kept the plot very exciting. I did like this one. I think this is a pretty good recommendation for a wintry thriller. The next book on my list is is The Drift by C.J. Tudor. I read this book earlier this year, and it's a thriller I did really enjoy. This one was very well written, very beautiful atmosphere and imagery. This is a book that reads very cinematic, similar to the last one I just spoke about in Unwanted Guest. Okay, something I loved about this book is it's not just a petty drama with marital struggles. Similar to the first two books on my list, Rock, Paper, Scissors and The Hunting Party. Those were so petty domestic thrillers, drama between unlikable characters. This was not that at all. It was way more highly elevated than that. I also found the writing to be very witty, very fast-paced. It's another one that I loved for the fact that the setting plays a huge role in the plot. It actually mattered and affected the characters. Honestly, if you are looking for a snowy, chilly thriller, I feel like The Drift has the best chilly vibes. I will say though that there are a ton of characters in this book. There are 3 main character perspectives that we follow. Within each of those perspectives, there is a multitude of side characters. In the beginning, I did find that a little confusing, but eventually I was able to settle into the plot and could follow the story easily. But overall, I think for the atmosphere and high stakes, The Drift was a very successful thriller. The next book on my list is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This is another book that I really enjoyed. Christina Henry is definitely a favorite author of mine. I have enjoyed every single book I have read from her so far. There is a palpable feeling of isolation and threat throughout this entire book. It's very ominous, it's very unexpected, and I would definitely recommend it for the chilly season if you're looking for something spooky and action-packed. I will say though that there is huge trigger warnings for domestic abuse in this book, especially the first 100 pages were very difficult for me to read, but there is a turning point and then there is an abrupt shift in tone in this book, and the second half of this book really picks up where it becomes much more of a plot-driven action thriller, whereas the first half of the book is definitely more of like a character study. Overall, I really enjoyed Near the Bone. I feel like Christina Henry did an amazing job at showing how people can be extremely resilient in the face of horror. The next book on my list is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf. This is one book that I definitely would not recommend to you guys if you are looking for a book that is going to give you the chilly, snowy vibes. They may be on the cover, but they're definitely not within the book. Hardly at all. I really thought that this book was going to be more of a fast, creepy, isolated thriller with that very atmospheric snowed-in setting. It was more of a slow-paced mystery with some pretty horrific SA scenes. I honestly wish I could go back in time and scrub this book from my memory and never have read this book. There are a few books I have that I wish I could go back and unread them. This is one of them because I was not expecting this book to be as disturbing as it was. It honestly really triggered me reading it. Another thing as well is I didn't think it made a lot of sense at the end of this book. It wasn't very clear to me the antagonist's motivations, like the reason why they did what they did. It seemed like a huge reaction for them without any real cause or reason. I just would have liked to see that developed a little bit more or explained. The final book on my list is One by One by Ruth Ware. I feel like this is a pretty hated book across BookTube, and I definitely have had my hits and misses with Ruth Ware. She has written some books that I have really enjoyed, and then she has some other books that are probably my least favorite books of all time. So she's a pretty hit or miss author. One by One is a book that I felt like was kind of middle of the road for me. I did love the snowy setting of this book, although I do think that we could have leaned into it a bit more and spent more time of this book developing that feeling of isolation and cold. The thing with this book is it is very predictable. I guessed the twist of this book very early on, but if you don't mind the fact that there is a very predictable ending, I do think that there was some really interesting action scenes and a really great slow build and standoff towards the end of this book that I really enjoyed. If you want a thriller with some good action, a fun, snowy setting, I think that this could be a good recommendation. That is all of the books I have to talk about in this video. If you guys have any snowy thriller or horror books that you would recommend, please let me know in the comments, because that is definitely one of my favorite things to read about, especially if it's like a survival story where the characters are trapped in some cold environment. I did actually recently haul a few more snowy setting thrillers. If you are interested in those, I would highly recommend checking out this video next. I went to a library sale and I got a ton of amazing books for such a great price. So definitely check out this video next.